What's going on, guys? Welcome to the 6 Yard Workshop. Today we're going to take this messy closet that we just moved into this house, and we're going to turn it into this. Well, I guess the TV magic's not working today, so I'm going to have to show you how to build it. Come along.
So my fiance and I recently purchased this house, about a month ago, and that's the reason I haven't been posting in a while. It's also the reason why it's a little bit messy. But now that we've done all the major renovations like the floors and the walls and framing in the closet you see here, I can start the little things like the closet organizer. And I'm very excited to bring you guys along for the ride. So I started by cleaning out the entire closet.
Okay, so it's time to take the measurements. And I would recommend measuring in every spot where you need to make a cut. And I would recommend measuring where the shelf is going to lay out. And I say that because I know that this isn't square. I framed it in myself, and the house has a slant to it, so the floor is lower here, meaning that this is crooked. So if I try and reference here or there, everything will be off. So in order to make something level, I'm going to have to, make it a ½ inch taller over here. Take your measurements here and on all four corners, because you can never trust that the house is actually square.
So I know I didn't explain that perfectly, but basically what I'm saying is don't trust that two sides of your closet are symmetrical. So after taking some measurements, I settled on a height of 6 feet for the top shelf, and I wanted it sticking 12 inches out from the wall.
So this is the wood I've chosen to go with. It's called pallet stock. It's basically 1x6 rough pine, anywhere from 6 to 8 foot lengths. I picked them up in my local sawmill for $2 a board, and it's basically not good enough to be like builder grade lumber, but I think it's going to work perfectly for this. And we're going to do minimal work to it just to keep its rough sawn appeal. I think that'll look really good.
So I picked out a few boards from my stack of lumber and ran one edge through the joiner. The one jointed edge is going to butt up against another jointed edge, allowing me to put two boards together and make one 12-inch by 6 foot long board.
So to hold these boards together, I'm going to use Gorilla Glue along the two jointed edges and mate them up. And then instead of waiting for the glue to dry, I'm going to use about 5 pocket hole screws on the small pieces and 6 on the large shelf. And that's going to hold everything together while the glue dries. So the glue will be the structural kind of, bonding agent, or it'll be the structural thing that holds them together. But it means we don't have to wait for glue to dry, and we can get this done in a day, which is what I'm looking to do.
So I'm using the Pocket Hole Mini, I think that's what it's called. I picked it up for about $20, and I use a C-clamp to attach to the wood because I was too cheap to spend the $35 on Craig's clamp that they want you to buy with it. I drilled 5 holes with it along the edge of the wood. Then I pre-positioned my screws, put a bead of glue on the edge of the wood, and clamped and screwed them all together. Using a clamp is really important because the board can slip just a little bit when you're screwing them together. It also allows you to adjust the boards and hold it in position while you screw it in to make sure everything is straight. After that, I used a 12-inch speed square and my circular saw to cut one edge square. Then I flipped the board over, measured 6 feet out, and cut the other side square along that 6 foot mark. To make the small inner shelves, I roughly cut 13-inch blanks and screwed them together using the same pocket hole and glue method. But this time, I used my table saw to square them up and then cut them all to 12 inches wide.
So I want to keep these rough sawn marks, basically these saw blade marks, and make it feel rough and try and keep it as like a rustic look. This is more of an experiment. I did it upstairs with some posts and it worked out okay, but I used 60 grit and they were 4x6 timbers. I'm going to try 120 grit on these guys, and we're just going to go over them super lightly, super quick, and then we're going to use 2 to 3 coats of Minwax polyacrylic, probably in gloss, just because that's what I have right now. And hopefully that should smooth these out to the point where you can still feel the saw marks, but you don't get any splinters. I don't even think I'm going to sand these. Like, you don't really catch your hand on them. I'll sand them maybe after I put some poly on them, but like it's kind of taken away the lines, which is what I want. That sand is way too powerful, so we're just gonna try with the clear coat and see how that goes. So for those wondering, this is what I'm using here. It's Minwax polycrylic in clear gloss. And I just want to show you guys the technique that I'm using. So what I'm doing, which is the most important part in my opinion, is I'm just finishing the non-show side. So that's the side people aren't going to see first. That way I don't have to deal with the show side having any marks or anything like that you know you don't want people to see. And then honestly, you're just kind of slapping it on like this. There's no real rhyme or reason to this, especially this first coat. It just wants to be like a pretty thick coat. Make sure you go in multiple directions, this way, this way. If you get in some tough spots, you can actually do circles with your brush. You just want to make sure that you're getting the polycrylic in every single crevice and every single like hole that it can go in for this first coat. And then we're going to let it dry and sand it and do a second coat.
Even though the wood felt smooth before applying the first coat of finish, that first coat of finish actually raises the grain of the wood, which gives the finish a rather rough and kind of bumpy feel to it. And to get rid of that, you use 220 or 320 grit and just give it a light sand after that first coat. If you listen closely, as I run my hand over the board, you can actually hear the difference between these sanded and unsanded parts. I took some offcuts that were about 2 inches wide and cut them to 12 inches long. I screwed these onto the end from the top down, giving me a bracket to attach the large shelf to the stud. While the final coat of finish was drying, I took these closet rods that I saved from the old demo that I planned on reusing and gave them a fresh paint job. For the final assembly, I screwed the first shelf in 2 feet up from the bottom, then I used my 12-inch speed square as a guide to place every shelf about a foot above the last. In the closet, I centered the main shelving unit with the center of the door, then used some shims under the right side to make sure it was sitting perfectly level. Being very careful not to scratch the paint, I gently placed the top shelf in and secured it to the main shelving unit using some pre-drilled holes and some screws, using a moon chair as a ladder, which I do not recommend by the way. Lastly, I attached the shelving brackets I made on the end of the large shelf into the studs, which I knew where they were since I framed the closet in. For the closet rods, we ended up doing one on each side of the main shelving unit, and then one 36 inches up off the floor on the left side. And guess which side I get versus which side my fiance gets. I'd really like to know what you think of this shelf in the comment sections below. It legitimately cost me $16 and about half a can of finish. I personally didn't like it the moment I finished it, but it's grown on me and I guess I can say I don't hate it anymore. I think it'll look better once I build more furniture that matches the rustic rough sawn aesthetic of the shelving unit. And remember, if I can do it, you can do it too.